Walter J. Paton School in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, opened its doors for students in grades 1 through 7 on November 6, 1950. Today, it serves about 400 students in grades 1 through 4. The youngest of Adam and Ellen Colleen Paton's 4 children, Walter John Paton, was born in Fitchburg, Massachusetts on June 4, 1904. Sadly, Walter's father died when he was just a baby, leaving his mother alone to care for him and his 3 siblings.
In fact, my parents started dating their high school sweethearts. And then he went to Fitchburg State, which was at the time called Fitchburg Normal School. It was a 2-year and you get a teaching degree. And as he was graduating, he came to her and he said, "Would you be willing to wait for me 4 more years?" And she said, "Yeah, but why?" And he said, "I've just been accepted at Boston University."
4 years later, Walter graduated from Boston University with high honors and married his longtime sweetheart, Marion Burns. In 1930, Walter, Marion, and their 3 children, Walter, Ann, and Ellen, moved to a house on Walnut Street in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, and Walter began teaching math at the Major Howard W. Beale Memorial High School.
I remember my neighbor Abby Larson would talk now and then about Walter Paton. She spoke very highly of him and how much the students respected him. Once she relayed a story of when the U.S. Army Band came to the high school and how the principal stopped the assembly to order the students to stop swaying on the bleachers in time with the marches. Abby said that they didn't understand what was wrong until Mr. Paton explained that an Army breaks step going over a bridge because it could collapse the bridge if they were in march step. The way he explained it was such that it was a lesson she never forgot.
Walter was already a first lieutenant in the Field Artillery Reserves when he was called to active duty in February of 1941. First stop, Fort Benning, Georgia.
Well, everyone told him he was foolish. When he was going through, they said that, you're a teacher, that's a reason not to be. You're over 35, that's a reason not to be. And you've got 3 children. And he said, "But it's my country, I've got to go."
From Fort Benning, he went to Camp Beauregard in Louisiana, then Camp Shelby, Mississippi, and Fort Knox, Kentucky, where he was attached to the 58th Armored Field Artillery. When Walter got to Camp Cook in California, he sent word to Marion that he would be there for quite some time. So she packed up the house, bought a train ticket for herself and the children, and headed west.
My dearest Marion, I just heard that you are leaving for California tomorrow, and I am very glad, and it will do you and Walter so much good. Do not worry. Courage. Your loving Auntie.
5 months later, Walter learned that he was to go overseas. Marion and the children moved back to Massachusetts and into a house across the street from her mother. As Walter, now a captain, and the 58th Armored Field Artillery headed to Camp A.P. Hill, Virginia.
And all of a sudden, he got in touch with her and told her he was going to be in New York for 24 hours. He had a furlough for 24 hours, so she got dressed and took a train and got to New York, and she went back, and the sun came out, they went dancing. She said it was like a dream.
The next day, Walter and the other men from the 58th boarded the SS Santa Rosa. Destination, Africa.
Our first home in North Africa was a cow pasture at the outskirts of Casablanca, where we pitched our tents. Each morning, we had a half-mile run before breakfast. Headquarters Battery still remembers the morning Captain Paton led his boys double-timing in the rain in full field to the clop, clop, clop of the GI shoes on the Macadam Road, while Sergeant Parker of Service Battery trumpeted out "A hunting we will go" on his bugle. Following the end of the African campaign, the 58th bivouacked at Gastou, Algeria, until the Sicilian invasion. Captain Paton, always being concerned for his men, made sure we had real food. After one evening meal, which included homemade ice cream, he asked me to take him to Philippeville the following day. During our ride, he explained that one of our cooks prepared all of the ice cream ingredients and had it frozen at an ice cream shop in that town, and that the shop charged double what was agreed upon, and he wanted to rectify it. The lady who operated the shop protested and brought in the local French commissioner of police. In response to our story, the commissioner chastised the lady, and Captain Paton got back the money we were owed.
The landing boats began to take the troops shoreward. Generals went in among the first waves. This was the stuff these men had trained for throughout the long months in Africa. Now they were on their way. Sandbars and the lashing surf had made it tough for landing craft, but nothing could stop them. Ton upon ton of food, ammo, and equipment were landed to follow the army, which was now beginning the actual occupation of Sicily.
On November 18, 1943, the campaign in Sicily was over, and Walter, now a major, and the 58th embarked on the RMS Aranee for England. For the next 6 months, they had assault and amphibious training and a little R&R in London. On June 6, 1944, the 58th Armored Field Artillery hit Omaha Beach in support of the 29th Infantry Division at 0630. They lost their battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Bernard McQuaid, as he struggled toward shore, along with 6 other officers, 30 enlisted men, 5 M7s, and 5 half-tracks.
The people at the reunion told us it took 3 days to find where your father was because he just kept moving. And they told him for the last 3 days he had the rank of lieutenant colonel and he was in charge of the whole 58th, rather than, that was 800 men rather than, you know, his platoon like.
With the entire battalion under his command, Walter led his men across France and into Belgium.
September 20, 1944. Darling sweetheart, well, here I am in England again. I was hit in Belgium on the 9th of September. I got a cut on my right arm between elbow and shoulder, about 3 inches long. It's pretty well healed up, so I'm hoping I can get back to my unit soon. At first, my arm was partly paralyzed, and I didn't have the full use of it, but by now it's almost perfect. So please don't worry over me. Just remember, I love you more than ever, and I'm looking forward to holding you in my arms. All yours forever and ever, your sweetheart.
After he was wounded, he was supposed to come home, and he got a letter from his driver. He had a man that drove him everywhere. And they had sent a coward in. And all he did was, when he went to bed at night, he had like 50 men circling his tent. He was so afraid somebody was going to get in. And the 58th was a real proud, fantastic. They were in the 5th, the 3rd, any army that had something they didn't want to threaten their own men pulled the 58th over, and they went in first. They were just a fighting unit.
Our battalion had been ordered to take a position at Longueville outside of Bastogne in Belgium. We assumed a position in an abandoned field in a dense fog, but the surprising silence of the night caused us to question why we were there. The dawn of the next day loudly answered our question with the terrifying thunder of intermittent shell fire and the sharply cracking sound of machine guns from a German military force rapidly encircling our position. The unforgettable Battle of the Bulge had taken center stage. After a furious struggle against overwhelming odds and the loss of 2 officers, 29 enlisted men either killed or missing, 58 men wounded, and the destruction of a number of our military vehicles, the battalion miraculously relocated to Bastogne. On the following morning, December 21, Lieutenant Colonel Walter Paton, the battalion commander, ordered the unit to move to Calais, Belgium. When we neared the historic and picturesque monastery of Beau Plateau, it was obvious that a further advance was blocked by German troops. An attempt to return to Bastogne around midnight was thwarted by the destruction of our lead vehicle, an M7 tank. Colonel Paton then ordered me to place all our men on guard around the monastery to prevent any infiltration of enemy soldiers. The overpowering terror of the previous evening was replaced by a dawn of peaceful silence. Then the Germans released a screaming barrage of shell fire, followed by the popping of machine guns. Colonel Paton ordered all vehicles to be burned, after which the men were to flee on foot. After a harrowing escape and evasion of the enemy in 15 miles of foot travel, aided by a heavy snowfall that covered our footprints, we found ourselves in a small country town named Fontenoy in Belgium. John R. Edwards, veteran, 58th Armored Field Artillery.
The new year came and went. The 58th received new equipment and was attached to the 11th Armored Division.
Sunday, March 4th, 1945. I'd been in a very bad tank battle the day before, and on returning to the battalion, they'd put me in the medics for a day to get me straightened out. That day I was called down to the Fire Direction Center, and while there, Colonel Paton came by me, put his hand on my shoulder, and said to me, "Lieutenant Baker, you did a great piece of work for us. I'm going on a recon trip to move the battalion forward, and I'll see you when I get back." Only he didn't come back.
She was absolutely stunned when the telegram came. She never thought he would die. She was positive he was coming home. She never had a doubt. She went unconscious the day she was told. She was semi-conscious for weeks. Finally, the doctor, I think the thing is the doctor had said, we'll give her a couple more days. If she doesn't come out of it, she's never coming out of it. And the next day she got up and she said, "What am I doing in bed? I have 3 children to raise." And that was it.
According to the battalion personnel adjutant, Lieutenant Colonel Paton was killed instantly, and the officer and enlisted man riding with him were seriously wounded that Sunday afternoon near Prum, Germany, when the vehicle in which they were riding hit a landmine. He was buried in the U.S. Military Cemetery No. 1 at Foy, Belgium, at 0800 on the 7th of March, 1945. Marion received countless letters expressing condolences from friends and family, but it was the letters from the men who served with her husband that really touched her. And none touched her more than the one she received in July of that year. It was from Lieutenant Bill Donnelly, the officer riding with Walter in the Weasel the day he was killed.
My dear Mrs. Paton, I'm sorry I'm so late writing, but I take my orders from the doctors now. On March 3rd, I had just gotten back from Paris Pass when I came in our tent. I lived with your husband. I saw him writing to you, and we kidded each other as we usually did. At about 0400, he awakened me and said he and I were going on reconnaissance for a new position forward. We went to division headquarters and were told the approximate location for the 58th. Your husband's job was through then, and it was my job to go forward and look over the new area. The main reason we all loved Walter so much was that he was absolutely fearless, one of the bravest men I've ever seen, and I've seen plenty. So he said he thought he'd join me and go for a ride. He shouldn't have, but it was typical of him, so away we went. We came to a blown-out bridge about 5 miles east of Prum, Germany, and crossed right through the water and went up front. We got our work done and started back to the battalion. It was a cold, rainy day, and the ground was very muddy. When we got to the bridge, we followed our old tracks off the road, again, and as we entered the shallow water, we blew up. Walter was killed instantly. The only thing I remember is coming to for a few minutes, as the medics were lifting me onto a stretcher. I said, "Never mind me, get the colonel." The medics said, "Sorry, bud, it's too late. I want you to know, Mrs. Paton, what a terrible job this has been for me to write. This, as I feel that his death is in some degree my fault. I should have argued him out of going with me, but I enjoyed his company so much, I said very little. I only wish it could have been me instead."
Walter was awarded a Silver Star for gallantry in action in connection with his efforts during the Battle of the Bulge, a Purple Heart from his commanding general for wounds received in action, and a Purple Heart posthumously by the War Department for the supreme sacrifice he made in the service of his country. In 1949, Walter's remains arrived in Fitchburg, the town of his birth, and were interred in St. Bernard's Cemetery. Shortly thereafter, Merle Sturtevant, superintendent of Shrewsbury Schools, announced that the school committee had voted to name the new school on Grafton Street after Walter J. Paton. a fitting memorial for a man so highly regarded by those who knew him and who paid the supreme sacrifice.
Walter J. Captain.